definitely increasing the pie, but how would you redivide it? Sounds like buses would definitely be a priority, but I didn't really hear you address roads much.
Well, with the roads, the biggest concern I've heard from constituents regarding roads is the condition of the roads in the city, particularly regarding the high ruts and also, which affect bicycle riders here. We get sued tremendously a lot in this city. And also the safety of the roads. I mean, 400 crashes a year with pedestrians a year, 250 for bicyclists. So when we talk about roads, we should be re-engineering them to actually lower the speed, not increase the speed, particularly on non-arterial roads or those roads that are through our residential areas. So the investment in roads should be made to, what I would say is you maximize the efficiency of the flow, for instance, using complete street orientation like they did in Stoneway, areas where you can add a middle lane for turning and you keep it 2 lanes. So this way you maximize the flow, but you also allow for a safer, smoother travel.
When talking about a transportation benefit district and the viaduct, you mentioned in your questionnaire, or seem to say that the decision's been made and this is really moving forward, but at the same time you're approaching it with a skeptical eye. It does seem like there will be a few council votes on the city contribution. I know the mayor's explanation where the $930 million of the city's money would come from. One thing you mentioned was a transportation benefit district, potentially utility rate increases and so on and so forth. So how are you going to approach that vote for raising city money for the viaduct?
Well, very carefully. One of the problems with the utilities, of course, that's a vote, but that's on our ratepayers, and that's $250,000, $250 million. And that will largely have to pay for the utility relocation costs. The other votes that will be taken depend on how I was just looking at those numbers and how what's being allocated. It's unclear. The state actually is supposed to pay up to $300 million for the waterfront, and the city was supposed to pay about $100 million, so I'm certainly supportive of that. Some of the other costs aren't very clear. They're very general categories. I don't know if you've seen the list. I've got it here. And there's no explanation for what's behind them. And so before I take a vote on any of it, I want to know where the money's going and what the benefit is. So that's all I can say at this point.
And it seems like for every dollar that the city allocates to the project, it's more likely that the state is going to take away a dollar it would have spent, say, on utility relocation fees or street improvements.
That's already happened.
And so that we can have the 2 mile long tunnel. And so, what do you think of the idea of the city standing up to say, no, upon further review, we're not going to contribute the funds that we had talked about? And that might make it more difficult, obviously, for the state to build a tunnel, but what do you think of that possibility, or do you like that idea?
Well, no, I'm open to that idea. I mean, from the very beginning, whether we call it the cut and cover tunnel or the deep bore tunnel, I pointed out that cost overruns are almost a certainty. They are across the country. And then where do those funds come from? The deal that was cut between the mayor and the governor and I believe the county executive never came before the council for approval, although I think the majority of the council would probably have approved it. Never came to a public vote, which is a major project. But we being elected officials and the public to a certain extent are faced with a proposal that's being presented now as the state's going to pick up the cost. The state legislature inserted a language that said that there would be additional tax on the downtown property owners, like a lid. And I think the lid is still in there for $300 million, which, quite honestly, I don't know if they're going to go for a $300 million lid. And our current ordinances, basically have property owners signing off on it. I don't think that's going to happen. So I've argued that you're at less than 5% design right now. They say that there'll be close to 30% tomorrow. We should not be spending any additional funds until we know where the money's coming from. If we do not have the money, then basically back to the drawing boards. Do not go forward with something that doesn't pencil out. So I guess I'm approaching it that way as opposed to saying we're not going to pay our utilities, because I think that wouldn't get us much traction, quite honestly, with the legislature or the governor, and I don't think we have the leverage. But I think we would have the leverage to say, look, it's going to cost all this much more money if we basically see where we're going. And so I think then we have more of a leverage with the state legislators and the governor to basically rethink about what works.
As far as growing new residents, thinking of the city as a whole, and thinking about transit-oriented development and that kind of thing, and trying to fit in the 1.7 million people that are going to be coming here. What do you think is a major strategy towards placing those people?
Well, I think we're headed down the right road with transportation-oriented development. We need to cluster additional residents around either sound transit stations or BRT stations. But we need to also, as we go forward with that, I think have stronger design control, because right now our design review is very weak. And I think that ends up doing two things. One, we end up with structures that are non-functional. We end up with, I live off of 85th, and I see a lot of townhouses forced to put in garages that no one can use. And so it doesn't help the community, nor does it help the people who live there. So we either drop the requirement for car spaces, and so there's better use for those facilities, those buildings going up, and make sure that there's good bus service, because they're primarily going to be buses, and that's why the bus service is so critical, and good sidewalks there. And also a little more flexibility in what we can do regarding putting together parcels, so we can do sort of village cottage development that don't conform to our current zoning, but will allow, not just for increased density, but will allow for a better sort of design orientation. There's a couple of really good examples that I've seen. One off of Ravenna on 65th, and
I live near there.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And there were some, and I was active in talking to the community before and after, and there were some hesitancy from the community residents initially, and then afterwards it was like, yeah, this works, it fits. I don't think, I've been active in community groups for a long time, and what I find, their opposition is not to density per se. Their opposition is usually twofold. It's one, parking spaces. They want to know that there's going to be a place for them to park their own car. But they also want to know if the building goes up that doesn't have parking spaces, is there a way for people to get to work or go someplace? And if they're assured of that, that's fine. The second is open space. People want open space. You just can't put folks into dense areas without providing for enough funds for open space. That's the reason I support the parks levy and further parks levies, and also dealing with developers. If they do use a large portion, then how can we work with them to open up more landscaping, greenery, and particularly trees? That's the other thing I've been emphasizing, is that as we go more dense, we need to also look at our tree canopy and make sure that we expand it. The goal right now is we've got about 20%. We want to go up to 30%. And that, if we do that, it's planting about 20,000 trees a year. So we need to work with community groups to get that done. So what I'm saying is that when the city as a policy moves forward and saying that we have to accommodate more people in the city, we have to also be attuned to what we're hearing in the community and why there's resistance, and address those needs as well.
In Publicola, Jesse Israel was quoted as telling another group that if there's a question between creating more compact development, density and trees, the density should win. What's your response to that?
No, I'd be the opposite, and and that's a simple question, and belies perhaps a simple answer, because maybe she has more complicated. But I mean, ultimately what it comes down to is you don't want cinder block houses being built, without any landscaping, without any trees. Because what it does, it creates a political resistance, which actually down the road makes it more difficult to push the agenda for stopping urban sprawl. So you want, there's a real practical functional element for wanting to have trees, good foliage, because you want to make the experience in a, for lack of a better word, more dense urban environment, a more pleasurable environment. Because if you don't make it more pleasurable, then you're going to get, you're going to lose votes. You're going to see a changeover in who's being elected. You're going to see a changeover on policies eventually that will go to promote more sprawl. So they have to go hand in hand.